So I am owner and principal of Keene Insights, and based in Los Angeles. At this point, it's just me with some subcontractors who I collaborate with, and it's pretty much entirely evaluation work, but sort of a generalist. I have projects that are in education and healthcare, public health, social services, kind of a pretty wide gamut anymore. So I started my business in 2012. I was working at a company and I was miserable, and I decided to leave. And in the quiet space of not being yelled at by a horrendous boss anymore, I thought, oh, you know what? I've been doing this work for 10 years. I really have a way that I would like to do it. Nothing earth shattering, just like actually being use focused and actually being sort of system focused and all these things that I think our field is, working on. And so I think I'm going to try to do this myself. And when I just sort of made that decision, I reached out to my little brother, and he also runs his own business doing stuff with cars that he can explain to me 100 times and I will still never understand. And I said, hey, I think I'm going to do this. I think I've got some contract work that can kind of get me through as I get this figured out and get this started. I'm so excited. He said, great, reach out to me if you have any questions. I said, I will. And so I did what I do, being sort of the introvert by nature. I went to the library and the bookstore, and I got a mountain of books about how to start your own business. And I proceeded to sit there with those books and read through them and get a sense of, what is it that I want to do? Why do I want to do that? How do I set up my finances, my business structure, all of that stuff. And a little, who knows at this point how much longer I had like a business plan developed. So let's say like a month or so, maybe later, my brother calls and checks in on me, says, how's it going? I said, oh, it's so great. I've learned so much, and I've got this business plan, and I've got a sense of what I'm going to do, and like I think I've got my finances figured out. And he said, so have you gone out anywhere? Have you talked to anybody? Have you started networking at all, or are you just like holed up in your house reading books? Well, I may have skipped the part where I have to actually let people know that I started this business. And so that was a good prompt and reminder. I don't think I had really thought about it entirely, that, okay, I really have to get out there. And then it was the realization, I don't want to do that because that sounds terrifying. I certainly had sort of this perspective of like, okay, now I have to go out and wheel and deal. I have to like convince people that I have awesome services that they want to buy, that sort of skeezy use of car salesman mentality. And I was like, how do I get into that mentality? And how do I make that work? And I was, of course, that sort of fear drove me back to the books a little bit, which actually worked out because I read two books in particular, and I can put links to them in the chat for anyone who's interested. There's a book called To Sell as Human by Dan Pink, and another one called Book Yourself Solid by Michael Port. I'm glad that came to me. And those books in combination basically reframed marketing for me in a wonderful way, which is there's sort of the core of it is, in this day and age, marketing is just about connecting and relationship building. And the chances of sort of sitting down at some event and sitting next to someone who is in a position to hire, who needs to hire right now, who has any authority over that, the chances of that are low. So it's really about sort of this purposeful, slow relationship building. And we've all been doing that all of our lives, making friends, dating, whatever. We've been doing that. So that just made it easier. I'm like, okay, if I reframe this in my head as I just have to go out and meet people and share myself and share my passion for my work, not a hard thing to do. And they'll share themselves with me, and we'll keep in touch. We'll see how it's going, whatever that looks like, and we'll see what clicks. So what I started to do then, when I sort of had that reframe, was still kind of build a little bit of foundation for what I wanted to do, which is, I wanted to work with nonprofits. I didn't, and as I said, I'm a generalist, so any kind of nonprofit worked, especially in those early days. So I started to kind of just go out to conferences and events where people who work in nonprofits might be, and started to talk to them and get to know them. And I still had to kind of, again, sort of have a little bit of a structure for, this is kind of how I want to talk about what I do with these folks. And these are the kinds of places I'm most likely to meet them. But beyond that, I just tried to let it be sort of organic in a way. And of course, the structure of following up with them, which means logging it, but you get the idea. The conversations were organic. So I started going, and I will say again, even in those early days, it was, and even with that reframe, it was at times certainly difficult to kind of go into these settings, even with that more low-key attitude and talk to people. I had a couple events where I had my husband drop me off and leave me, so I couldn't come home. And there was always like 5 minutes in the bathroom at the beginning of the event, like, okay, I can do this. It got easier. And really, it was like, sit down next to somebody, start chatting, get to know them, and then, follow up, share context, share information. And the ways in which it evolved into work, I don't think I could have predicted. So as an example, I went to there's an organization in California called Cal Nonprofits. So it's sort of a hub for nonprofits in the state, and they have an annual conference. And so I went to that conference, and I sat down next to a lady who works for a foundation in the state, and she helps them run an annual conference for all of their grantees that has a bunch of training opportunities. And so we kind of talked about that, and she followed, and then I kind of kept in touch. She had mentioned to me that, thank you, Matt. As she had mentioned to me that they were moving offices soon. And so I followed up with her a little while later. I said, how did that move go, et cetera, et cetera. And she ended up reaching out to me because they were about to put on that conference, and they hadn't really ever had an evaluator do a training sort of in their lineup. So I said, sure, I can do that. Put together, a couple-hour presentation on evaluation readiness. And I conducted that presentation, and, that put me in front of a bunch of people who were funded by this foundation and who were doing a variety of work. And at the end of that session, a few people came up to me and they said, we're in Ventura County. This doesn't feel like a thing that is happening in Ventura County. Are you in Ventura County? That's north of LA, one county north of LA. I said, no, but who should I connect with? And so they connected me with a group up there that was sort of a local nonprofit hub that provided consultation and training to nonprofits in the area. And I began doing trainings for them as well. And eventually sort of had a little bit of a network of clients and projects out of Ventura County through that pathway. And so, again, it's just that connecting and that relationship building. You just kind of have to follow the paths and see how it opens up. And I think just the other things I'll highlight in that, and then I'm happy to answer questions, is the way that it's been helpful to frame it in my mind is, and this is sort of the way that Michael Port talks about it in his book, is to think about, in that relationship building process, there are ways, what are some ways you can share yourself, who you are, what's going on in your life? What are some ways that you can share who you know? Are there other people in your network that you could connect these, people you've met to as part of this relationship building process? And in what ways can you share what you know? How can you, if you've had a conversation with them and maybe talked a little bit about some of the challenges they're experiencing as an organization, maybe there's some resources you can follow up with and send along that might support them in that. So really thinking about ways you can share yourself, share your network, and share your knowledge with people that you meet as you build relationships and get to know them. And I think in the longer run, I will say the networking is still important, but of course, once you've kind of got some momentum, then what I've found is it's really about doing good work, because now it's all about, hey, you liked my work, right? Tell people about it. And so it's the relationship building that comes with working with people and then leveraging those relationships into more work where I can. So I think I'm just looking at my notes real quick to see if there's anything else that I really, really wanted to share. And then I'm happy to answer questions.
So I have a question for you, and I see some questions popping in here. So would you confirm for me, and this is what I think we hear a lot, that the majority of your marketing happens within your existing projects and within your existing network versus reaching out and doing kind of like cold calls and mailings? What do you think?
At this point, yes. At this point, yes. So in the initial buildup of my business, it was all about meeting new people and developing those relationships over time and seeing what kind of projects popped for those. And it could be a couple of years later that something, that kind of building those relationships before something came through. But now I don't, I've been busy for a number of years now. And so I haven't needed to go out and do some new intensive networking.
And I'm just going to keep recording for a little bit. In a little while, I'll run out of material and I'll stop recording and let people pop in and fill me in. So I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit here about some of these questions I'm seeing pop in and some of the questions I know we hear a lot. So what's your advice then for those folks who don't have projects, who maybe have a project or are thinking about their first project? How do they start?
Yeah, I think it's really about figuring out where, and gosh, I unfortunately cannot speak exactly to how to do this in a virtual world, but it's just figuring out where your potential clients are, where are the spaces that they are in, and how can you meet them and connect with them. And it could be going to those events that they're going to. It could also just be reaching out one-on-one and seeing if you can get those informational interviews to get that relationship started. I see Lauren had asked if the presenting at conferences has helped generate future clients. So doing training has ended up kind of being something I do very regularly now, at least a few times a year. I'm running at least one or a half day or a full day training on evaluation related topics. And that definitely continued to be a place where, where people have then followed up. It tends to be smaller projects. Like I'm not getting huge projects in that way, but working with smaller nonprofits, and it's enjoyable work. So that has worked. And then I'm going to answer Jason's question, and then Kierna, I'll call on you. So does relationship building suggest focus is more on personal communications than public communications? That's been my experience, that sort of that one-on-one relationship building is where the work is where developing the work is. Now that said, once you have your network, you can always think about, maybe there's a newsletter I can put out. Like if you're thinking about sharing information that you could put out a newsletter or set up a Facebook page as another touch point to continue to reach out to people. I think that's more effective once you have that relationship, though, rather than sort of being the starting point for connecting. I guess would be my answer to that. Kierna?
Good. Thank you so much for sharing, Laura. My question is about following up on what you said about knowing where your target audience is. Do you need to conduct this sort of competitive analysis before you start, or target audience research, try to map out like who's in your location, who's providing which services, what are your target audience in terms of, are those big organizations or small grassroots organizations? Do you need to conduct that type of research before?
Yeah, so I'm going to partially answer that question, and then I think I will let Matt and anyone else jump in. So and this is why Matt and I are good co-presenters, because I very much fly by the seat of my pants in my work. So I've never done anything that formal. I just kind of like, in my mind, it was kind of like, I want to work with nonprofits. Where are they? And that was about the extent to which I thought about it. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So Matt or anyone else who's sort of had experience maybe doing a little bit more formal look at the landscape, I welcome you to chime in.
So Karina, one of the things that we talk about is making sure you have an understanding for what's your niche. And that's, we have a whole, and I'll put it in the chat. We have a whole, we've done it a couple of times with the topic chats, but it's kind of identifying who you want to work with. And I mean, it's an art, right? It's really not a science. Things are constantly evolving, and things have gone through crazy evolutions in the last, 16 months. But at some point you want to say, this is who I am. Here's who I want to serve. This is the kind of skills I can provide and kind of services I can provide, and just work within that network of people. And so then you start to talk about the things that Laura was saying, was engaging within your different clients. And then as you have success with one client, how do you continue to work with that client, but also with people like them? So for me, it's universities and school districts. And to what degree can I work with one school district in a region? How do I start working with that next school district? Almost invariably, in as much as I try, it becomes very organic. I end up at a meeting where all the school district superintendents are there. That's why the important thing is to show up to meetings and talk to people who are there and just see what happens. And if you get a chance to present, that's even better than showing up, because now you look like you're an expert at something, and they're frequently looking for somebody to fill up the space of a meeting anyway. So, that's marketing 101, just showing up, being friendly, helping out, and offering to assist in as much as you can. And then you look good in front of a bunch of people, and then next thing you know, you're having a conversation over coffee. Now, we had a question about social media platforms. And I certainly am the worst at this. I'm absolutely the worst. In fact, we have a big program now, and I'd be like, is somebody doing that? Because I don't even know what's happening with the Facebook and the Twitter platforms for our new projects. So what do you think, Laura?
Oh, I have a graveyard of abandoned social media sites. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, at least it's there. I don't have to do a lot. I think I started posting there for a while and stopped. So I can't speak to that. I think that for me, the connections and the relationship building have just been much more analog, or just email. But again, I open it to the group if there's others who have had luck with certain social media platforms as a way to kind of stay connected with people as you're doing that relationship building.
And then we have a question from Margaret about adjusting your approach to maintaining relationships. I guess this kind of opens up the whole question, like, how do you evolve? You've been doing this for more than a couple of years now, Laura, but you're not a long time, but at the same time, you've had to see things change. You've had different kinds of projects, and you've probably evolved your own skill set. So how do you think about that? How does your marketing approach change over time?
Yeah. Again, I think that for me, once there was a certain level of momentum, a lot of it has been about just doing a really good job, so that people want to rehire me or tell other people about the work I've done. And maintaining good relationships within those projects and within that work, I think, has been most of where my focus has been. I did have, I'm thinking, and it'll be interesting, maybe I'll have to come on again next year, because I've got some things winding down at the end of this year, and may actually have to kind of think about how to go back out there more purposefully. I think that, my move next year will probably just be to start by reaching out to everyone I know already and say, hey, I'm looking for work, and what do you, let me know if you see anything that you think might be a good fit for me. Trying to think if there's been other occasions along the way where I kind of Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and this may be sort of adjacent to answering a question, but so one of the things that has happened in the 8 years I've been doing this is that the size of projects has gotten bigger. So having experience gives me momentum to take on, to sort of compete in bigger projects. And so I'd say in the last couple of years, I've had to do a little bit more RFP writing to get those big projects. I mean, there's a whole conversation about RFPs, and could be today or another day, but it's still only things that sort of, where I've already kind of got a contact and I know what's going on. I still won't do cold proposal writing, but I have had to do a little bit more sort of formal proposal writing to get some of those bigger projects that have come in the last few years. So yeah, I guess, again, talk to me in a couple of years, I might have more to say about that question.
I'm going to stop the recording here, and and then that way there might be people who want to pop in, but they don't want to be recorded. So I'm going to stop it, and we'll continue chatting. I can grill you all day on this stuff. So